In the heart of Rome, a city that is itself a living museum of faith and history, stands the world's smallest sovereign state. Vatican City, with its soaring basilica, majestic palaces, and revered museums, is the spiritual and administrative center of the Roman Catholic Church, a global institution that guides the lives of over 1 billion souls. To the world, it presents a face of public liturgy, global diplomacy, and pastoral care, all radiating from the figure of the Supreme Pontiff, the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. His public masses in St. Peter's Square are televised to millions. His encyclicals are dissected by theologians and leaders alike. His travels are major global events. Yet behind this public persona, and within the hallowed walls of the Apostolic Palace and the Vatican's secret archives, there exists another dimension of the papacy, a realm shrouded in silence, accessible only to one man on earth at any given time. This is the world of the secret rituals performed solely by the Pope. These are not the public ceremonies of the liturgical calendar, but deeply private, often ancient rites of immense spiritual gravity. They are the hidden engines of the papacy, the sacred duties that define the office beyond its public-facing role. They are acts of intercession, of consecration, of spiritual warfare, and of profound communion with the divine, handed down from pope to pope in an unbroken chain of whispered instructions and sealed documents. The existence of many of these rituals is only hinted at in obscure theological texts, or in the fragmented accounts of retired members of the Swiss Guard, or trusted private secretaries who have caught glimpses of a ceremony's edge, but never its core. They are the subject of intense speculation and wild conspiracy theories, but their true nature is far more profound, rooted in a 2,000-year-old tradition that views the Pope not just as a leader, but as a unique sacerdotal vessel. The weight of these rituals is immense. Each reigning pontiff inherits them upon his election, traditionally receiving a private briefing from the Camille and the most senior members of the College of Cardinals. This transmission of knowledge is not a formal investiture, but a sacred trust, a passing of keys to a locked room within the Vatican's spiritual architecture. The rituals are diverse in their purpose and origin. Some date back to the earliest days of the Church, born in the catacombs when the followers of Christ were a persecuted sect and their leaders performed rites in fear and secrecy. Others emerged during the Middle Ages, a response to schisms, plagues, and perceived spiritual threats. A few are more modern, codified in the last few centuries, to address the unique challenges of the contemporary world. To understand these rituals is to understand the papacy itself in its most unvarnished form. It is to move beyond the white cassock and the fisherman's ring, and to glimpse the solitary burden of the man who wears them. He is, in these moments, utterly alone in his authority and responsibility. There are no photographers, no cheering crowds, no diplomats. There is only the silence of a private chapel, the weight of centuries of prayer, and the palpable presence of a duty that transcends time. These ceremonies are not performed for effect or for an audience. They are performed out of necessity, out of a deeply held belief that the spiritual stability of the Church, and by extension, the world, depends in part on their faithful execution. The secrecy surrounding them is not one of elitism or exclusion for its own sake. It is a secrecy of reverence, of protecting the sanctity of mysteries deemed too powerful and too holy for public display. It is a recognition that some things, in their purest form, must exist outside the realm of the mundane and the profane gaze. To broadcast them would be to diminish their power, to turn a sacred act into a spectacle. Furthermore, the Vatican operates on a principle of disciplined silence. Its most sensitive operations, both spiritual and diplomatic, are conducted under a vow of utmost confidentiality. The Pope's private rituals are the apex of this principle. This narrative seeks to pull back that veil, not through speculation or invention, but by piecing together the historical accounts, the theological context, and the rare sanctioned disclosures that have emerged over centuries. We will journey into the Sistine Chapel, not during a conclave, but in the deep of night, when it is empty save for one man. We will descend into the Vatican grottos, not as tourists, but as silent observers of an ancient tradition. We will examine the ritual of the 3 keys, the secret consecration of the global chalice, the private exorcism of the Holy See, the liturgy of the unseen martyr, and the mysterious and solemn oath of the Last Testament. Each of these rites reveals a different facet of the papal mandate as the Church's chief intercessor, its ultimate exorcist, its keeper of secrets, and its humble servant awaiting his own mortality. This is a journey into the heart of a hidden tradition, an exploration of the duties that define the man who sits on the chair of Peter. Duties known fully to him and to God alone. It begins not with a ceremony, but with a key, and a door closed to all but the successor of the Apostle Peter. To comprehend the nature of the Pope's most secret duties, one must first understand the physical and symbolic heart of their concealment. The Vatican Secret Archive, now known officially as the Vatican Apostolic Archive. This institution is not merely a library of old books and scrolls. It is a fortress of secrets, a labyrinthine repository that holds the empirical memory of the Church across millennia. Its shelves, stretching over 85 linear kilometers, contain everything from the trial transcripts of the Knights Templar to letters written by Michelangelo from the petition of Henry VIII, seeking annulment from Catherine of Aragon, to the records of every pope for the last 1200 years. But within this vast ocean of paper and parchment, there exists a smaller, more secure vault. And within that vault, a single cabinet made of iron and walnut wood, sealed with 3 distinct locks. This is the Armorium Arcanorum, the secret cabinet, and it is the gateway to the Pope's private ritual life. The first and most foundational of the rituals entrusted solely to the pontiff revolves around the opening of this cabinet. It is known as the ritual of the 3 keys, and it is performed only under the most specific and dire circumstances. The purpose of this ritual is not to access the cabinet for casual consultation. It is an act of spiritual preparation, an unlocking of sacred knowledge that is considered too potent to be handled without the most solemn precautions. The contents of the Armorium Arcanorum are not simply read, they are enacted. They are the scripts for the rituals themselves, written on vellum in archaic scripts, often in a coded language that only the Pope and his most trusted predecessor, now deceased, could fully decipher. The ritual begins not in the archive, but in the Pope's private chapel, dressed not in his formal papal vestments, but in a simple white linen alb, devoid of any insignia. The Pope kneels in silence for a period of contemplation that can last an hour or more. This is a stripping away of his office, a momentary return to the core of his identity as a priest and a sinner before God. He prays for guidance, for purity of intention, and for protection. The prayers are ancient, whispered in a low voice, and they include specific invocations to the Archangel Michael, the defender against the shadows, and to Saint Peter, the first holder of the keys, asking for his intercession and wisdom. Following this period of preparation, the Pope is met by 3 individuals outside the reinforced doors of the archive's innermost sanctum. These are the holders of the 3 keys. One key is held by the Cardinal Archivist of the Vatican Secret Archive. The second is held by the Cardinal Camerlengo, the Chamberlain who administers the Vatican's temporal goods during a papal interregnum. The third and most important key is held by the Pope himself. The presence of all 3 is mandatory. No single person, not even the Pope, can open the path alone. This is a checks and balances system of profound theological significance, representing the interplay between the Church's tradition, the Archivist, its temporal authority, the Camerlengo, and its spiritual authority, the Pope. Together, they embody the full unity of the Church's mission. In complete silence, the 3 men proceed through the secure corridors. The only sound is the soft rustle of their vestments and the measured click of their footsteps on the marble floors. The atmosphere is one of intense gravity, not of fear, but of immense respect for what is about to be undertaken. They reach the final gate, a massive door of bronze and reinforced oak. Each man, in turn, inserts his key into a separate lock. The order is precise. First the Archivist, then the Camerlengo, and finally the Pope. The turning of the keys is synchronized. With a deep, resonant thud that echoes in the silent hall, the bolts retract. The Cardinal Archivist and the Cardinal Camerlengo then bow deeply to the Pope and withdraw without a word, leaving the Supreme Pontiff alone at the threshold. They return to the entrance of the archive complex, where they will wait and pray until he emerges. The Pope now crosses the threshold alone, closing the great door behind him. He is now within the most restricted area of the archive. Before him stands the Armorium Arcanorum. Using his own key once more, he unlocks the final, single lock on the cabinet itself. The door swings open on well-oiled hinges, revealing not shelves of files, but a small number of aged portfolios, each tied with a crimson cord, sealed with the leaden bulla of a past pope. The selection of the portfolio is itself a part of the ritual. The Pope does not browse. He is there for a specific purpose, perhaps a brewing global conflict, a deep schism within the Church, or a perceived spiritual crisis of unprecedented scale. Guided by prayer and the brief instructions passed down from his predecessor, he selects one portfolio. He does not open it there. Instead, he carefully lifts it from its resting place, feeling the immense weight of history and responsibility it carries. He then closes and relocks the armorium, and then the great door to the sanctum, his 3 keys turning once more to seal the secrets away. The portfolio is then taken directly to the Pope's private study, a room adjacent to his personal chapel. Only there, surrounded by the signs of his office but insulated from all eyes, does he break the seal and untie the cord. The contents are never what an outsider might expect. They are not strategic plans or political directives. They are liturgical texts. They are the rubrics and formulae for one of the secret rituals, precise set of prayers, gestures, and meditations to be performed, often at a specific time and in a specific location within the Vatican. The ritual of the 3 keys is not the performance itself. It is the essential, solemn prelude. The act of retrieving the sacred script that will guide the Pope in his unique, solitary intercession before God. It is the first and most fundamental step into the secret spiritual landscape of the papacy, a landscape he must now traverse alone. Among the most sacred and enduring duties of any priest is the consecration of the Eucharist, the moment where, according to Catholic belief, bread and wine become the body and blood of Jesus Christ. This miracle is performed daily by thousands of priests around the world during the celebration of Mass. Yet, there exists a parallel, far more obscure rite known only to the Pope, the secret consecration of the global chalice. This is not a Mass. It is a solitary act of cosmic intercession, performed with a specific set of vessels that are never used in any public liturgy. The ritual finds its roots in the early medieval period, a time of great upheaval and anxiety for the Church. The concept was theological, while every valid Mass connects the faithful to the eternal sacrifice of Christ. Could there not be a singular supreme act of consecration performed by the Supreme Pontiff that would, in a mystical sense, encompass the entire world? A consecration not for the feeding of a congregation, but for the spiritual fortification of creation itself. This was the genesis of the rite, and it has been performed in strict secrecy by every pope for over 1,000 years. The vessels used are known as the chalice of the world and the paten of the nations. They are kept in a niche behind a hidden panel in the Sacrestia dei Poppi, the Pope's sacristy, located behind the left transept of St. Peter's Basilica. The chalice is not crafted from precious metals in the ornate Baroque style one might expect. It is a simple, deep bowl of unadorned silver, its surface dull with age, dating perhaps to the 8th or 9th century. The paten, a matching plate of the same metal, is similarly plain. Their simplicity is intentional. Their power is meant to derive not from artistry, but from their purpose and the authority of the one who uses them. The ritual is performed at noon on the winter solstice and midnight on the summer solstice. These celestial turning points, times of profound symbolic change between darkness and light, are chosen to represent the Church's mission to illuminate the entire world and all moments in time. The location is never the public altar of St. Peter's, but the tiny, ancient chapel of San Lorenzo nel Palazzo, also known as the Chapel of the Blessed Sacrament of the Papal Apartment. This is perhaps the most private of all the Pope's chapels, a space used by him alone. The preparation is intense. The Pope fasts for 12 hours prior. He vests himself not in the colorful chasuble of a Mass, but in a stark white alb and a stole of deep purple, the color of penance and expectation. There are no servers, no masters of ceremonies, no choir. The silence in the small, dimly lit chapel is absolute, broken only by the sound of his own breathing and the distant, muffled noises of the Vatican City outside. On a bare altar, he places the chalice of the world and the paten of the nations. The wine he uses is from a small, sealed ampulla, the water from a specific spring, whose location is a closely guarded secret, said to be from a source blessed by the first apostles. The bread is a single, large host, baked by a closed order of cloistered nuns, who pray continuously during its preparation. The Pope then begins the rite. It is a liturgy of profound silence. There are no readings, no hymns, no homily. The entire ceremony consists of a long, contemplative preamble of prayer, followed by the core of the Eucharistic prayer itself. but the words are subtly different from those of the public Mass. The language is Latin, but the formulae are archaic, emphasizing the cosmic nature of the act. The prayers speak of sanctifying the four corners of the earth, of pouring out grace upon all creatures, seen and unseen, of consecrating the joys and sorrows of all humanity. The Pope's gestures are slow, deliberate, and filled with a palpable sense of weight, as he recites the words of institution, Hoc est enim, corpus meum. Following the consecration, there is no distribution of communion. Instead, the Pope elevates the host, and then the chalice, not for a congregation to see, but in the four cardinal directions, south, east, and west, is silent offering to the entire world. He then kneels in adoration for a prolonged period, often lasting half an hour or more, holding the spiritual state of humanity in his heart before God. The conclusion of the ritual is as significant as its performance. The consecrated species are not consumed in the normal manner. The Pope reverently consumes a portion of the host and a sip from the chalice, uniting himself with this universal sacrifice. The remainder of the consecrated bread is then carefully dissolved into the consecrated wine within the chalice. This mingling is a powerful symbol of the unity of the body of Christ, the Church across all nations and peoples. This mixture is then not discarded, but carried by the Pope in a solemn procession to a private, secure oratory deep within the Vatican gardens. There, it is placed in a special tabernacle, different from all others. It remains there, the real presence of Christ consecrated for the entire world, until the next solstice, when the ritual is repeated and the previous offering is replaced. The chalice of the world and the paten of the nations are then meticulously cleansed by the Pope's own hand, using only pure water and a linen cloth, before being returned to their hidden niche. The secret consecration of the global chalice is perhaps the most beautiful and theologically profound of the private rituals. It is an act of ultimate pastoral care, a silent, hidden offering made by the Father of the entire Church for his children scattered across the earth, seen by no one but witnessed, in faith, by all. While the Church has a dedicated corps of priests, trained and appointed as exorcists to perform the rite of exorcism on afflicted individuals, there exists a separate and far more solemn rite reserved for the Pope alone. This is not an exorcism of a person, but of a place, an institution, and an office. The private exorcism of the Holy See. It is a ritual of spiritual defense and purification performed on the physical and metaphysical heart of the Catholic Church itself. Its purpose is to fortify the bark of Peter against what theology defines as the insidious, corrupting influences of the diabolical, which are understood to target the Church's leadership and its central mission with particular ferocity. The ritual is performed only when certain conditions are met. There is no scheduled date. Instead, it is precipitated by events of such profound scandal, internal corruption, or systemic failure within the Church's own ranks that they suggest a level of spiritual malignancy beyond mere human failing, a widespread crisis of faith among the clergy, the discovery of deeply entrenched sin within the Curia, or a period of historic papal fallibility and confusion could all be triggers. The decision to perform it rests solely on the Pope's conscience, guided by prayer and the discernment passed down through the secret instructions he inherited. The rite is conducted in 3 locations, moving from the public heart of the Church to its most private administrative center, symbolically cleansing the entire institution from its outer manifestation to its inner soul. The first stage takes place in the Basilica of St. Peter itself, but after it has been closed to the public and emptied of all personnel, the Pope enters through the holy door, which is sealed shut behind him, leaving him utterly alone in the vast, cavernous space. The only light comes from the vigil lamp above the confessio and the single candle he carries. He processes slowly down the central nave, not towards the high altar, but pausing at specific points. Before the statue of St. Peter, at the tomb of St. Pius X, and finally in the center of the transept, directly beneath the great dome. At each station, he recites, not in a shout, but in a low, firm voice of command, the ancient prayers of purification from the ritual Romanum, but with modifications specific to the rite. He prays for the cleansing of the stones, of the art, of the very air of the basilica, that it may be freed from any shadow of pride, ambition, or deception that may have seeped into its sacred space through the sins of those who worshipped there. He sprinkles holy water, not from the common stoup, but from a small, medieval aspersorium, used only for this purpose. its water mixed with salt blessed in a ceremony centuries old. The second stage moves to the Sistine Chapel. This is the chamber where popes are elected, where the College of Cardinals meets in conclave, and where the most sensitive theological and doctrinal discussions occur. It is therefore a nexus of spiritual power and human vulnerability. Here, the Pope's actions are more intense. He stands before Michelangelo's terrifying fresco of the Last Judgment, facing the depiction of Christ the Judge. The ritual here involves a prolonged litany of saints, invoking each one not only for their intercession, but as a witness to the purity of the Church throughout history. He calls upon the apostolic founders, the great doctors of the Church, the reformer saints and the martyrs, asking them to spiritually reinforce the walls of the chapel against the spiritual forces of wickedness that seek to influence the Church's governance and doctrine. He then incenses the entire room with a thick, pungent incense, whose recipe is a secret of the office of liturgical celebrations, believed to have purifying properties. The final and most secret stage of the exorcism occurs in the Pope's private study in the Apostolic Palace. This is the cleansing of the office itself, the munus petrinum, the Petrine ministry. The Pope kneels before a simple crucifix that rests on his desk. The prayers here are entirely extemporaneous, spoken from the heart in a whisper. He confesses the sins and failures of the papacy throughout history, the pride, the nepotism, the cowardice, the thirst for temporal power, and begs for mercy and purification. He then, in a moment of immense spiritual gravity, pronounces the words of the exorcism upon himself and his office. He does not command a spirit to leave a person, but rather commands any influence that is not of God to be severed from the exercise of his apostolic authority. He renounces, in the name of Christ, all diabolical claims upon the chair of Peter, and pleads the precious blood of Christ over the papacy, past, present, and future. The ritual concludes with the Pope praying the Creed slowly and deliberately, reaffirming the core truths of the faith as an act of spiritual refoundation and defiance against any power of confusion or error. He then sits in absolute silence for a long time, often until the first light of dawn touches the windows of his study. The private exorcism of the Holy See is the most arduous and psychologically draining of the secret rituals. It is an act of profound humility, where the Supreme Pontiff, the Vicar of Christ on earth, acknowledges the vulnerability of the institution he leads to forces of darkness, and actively, through the authority of his office, wages spiritual war against them. It is a stark admission that the gates of hell which Christ promised would not prevail against the Church, nevertheless, never cease their assault, and that the Church's first and strongest line of defense is the humble secret prayer of its highest priest. Within the long and often tragic history of the Church, a history written in the blood of martyrs, there exists a unique and secretive tradition meant to honor those whose sacrifice remains unknown to the world. This is the liturgy of the unseen martyr, a requiem, mass offered by the Pope for a single specific solar martyr, whose identity, story, and even error are often a mystery, but whose witness is known to God and through the secret mechanisms of the Church signaled to its supreme pastor for commemoration. The origins of this ritual are shrouded in the dust of antiquity. Some theologians within the Vatican's most reserved circles trace it back to the Roman persecutions, when the Church often knew that a Christian had been taken by the authorities and executed for their faith, but the body was lost, or the name went unrecorded. The early bishops of Rome felt a profound duty to honor these unknown soldiers of the faith. Over centuries, this duty evolved into a formal, secret liturgy performed only when the Church believes, through a confluence of prayer, circumstance, and divine prompting, that such a martyr has entered into glory. The process of identification is not a bureaucratic one. It is a matter of spiritual discernment. The trigger can be varied. Perhaps a fragment of ancient bone is discovered in a catacomb sealed since the 3rd century, found with unequivocal Christian symbols but no identifying marks. Or a diplomatic cable from a nuncio in a hostile nation might report the rumored execution of a clandestine catechist, though the body will never be recovered and the name never confirmed. Sometimes, it is less tangibly a period of intense prayer within the Church, as contemplative orders might consistently bring to mind the image of an unnamed witness, a sense of collective intercession that something has occurred which requires recognition. This information is filtered through the Congregation for the Causes of Saints and Macar, in the most delicate cases, presented directly to the Pope. The decision to perform the liturgy is his alone. The Mass is celebrated, not at the high altar of any major basilica, but in the Cappella del Coro, the choir chapel, located deep within the Apostolic Palace. It is a small, intimate space used primarily by the papal household and the Swiss Guard for their daily Mass. For this rite, it is emptied of all but 2 witnesses whose presence is absolutely required: the Pope's personal secretary, who serves as the altar server, and the prefect of the papal household, who acts as a canonical witness. Both are bound by a sacred oath of perpetual silence regarding what they see and hear. The altar is draped in black, the liturgical color for requiems, but adorned not with the typical symbols of mortality, but with deep red, chasuble and stole, the color of martyrdom. The missal used is not the standard Roman missal, but an ancient, hand-copied text reserved for this specific purpose. The language is Latin, but the prayers are unique. There is no mention of a specific name. Instead, the liturgy refers to the blessed witness, the hidden servant, the lamb slain in secret, whose blood cries out to heaven. The readings are chosen not for their narrative, but for their thematic power. From the book of Revelation, the vision of the multitude of martyrs from every nation, tribe, people and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. From the Gospels, Christ's words, "Everyone who acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven." The homily, delivered in a soft, contemplative tone by the Pope, is not an explanation but a meditation on the nature of witness. He speaks of the countless souls across history who have sealed their faith in silence and obscurity, whose victory is known only to God, but whose sacrifice strengthens the entire body of Christ. He ponders the mystery of a love so great it chooses annihilation for the sake of truth, without any desire for earthly recognition. The most poignant moment comes during the Eucharistic prayer, in the place where the names of the saints are usually invoked. In union with the whole Church, we honor Mary, the ever-Virgin Mother of God. We honor Joseph, her spouse, the apostles and martyrs, Peter and Paul, Andrew. The Pope adds a specific, secret clause. He pauses, and in a voice thick with emotion, he inserts, "And we honor especially today your faithful servant, the unseen martyr, whom you have gathered to yourself in the mystery of their passion." This is the only moment the unknown martyr is directly addressed, their existence acknowledged before God in the most sacred prayer of the Church. Following the Mass, the Pope does not give a final blessing. Instead, he spends a long time in kneeling thanksgiving, praying for the soul of the martyr and for the grace to have a fraction of their courage. The black and red vestments are carefully folded and stored away with the special missal, not to be used again until the next time the silent bell of an unknown sacrifice tolls within the heart of the Church. The liturgy of the unseen martyr is a profound act of spiritual justice. It ensures that no witness to Christ, however hidden, is ever truly forgotten by the Church they died for. It is the Pope, as the universal pastor, personally fulfilling the duty to honor every single sheep of his flock, especially those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in silence and darkness, guaranteeing that their passage into eternal life is celebrated with the full dignity and solemnity of the Catholic faith, even if no one on earth knows their name. The final secret ritual performed by a pope is unique, for it is not about the exercise of his power, but about the contemplation of its end. It is not performed at a set time, but only once, and it is the only one of these rites that is directed as much toward his successors and the institution of the papacy as it is toward God. This is the oath of the Last Testament, a solemn vow made by a newly elected pontiff concerning the handling of the Church, his most sensitive secrets upon his death. It is the mechanism that ensures the continuity of the hidden traditions and protects the Church from the chaos that could ensue if its most dangerous knowledge were to be prematurely or improperly exposed. The ritual takes place not in a chapel, but in the Vatican's Sala dei Poppi, the Hall of the Popes, a long gallery within the Apostolic Palace, lined with portraits of every supreme pontiff in history. The setting is deliberate. It places the new pope visually within the unbroken line of his predecessors, reminding him that he is a link in a chain that stretches back to Peter and must continue forward after him. He is not an isolated monarch, but a steward of a trust that transcends his own life and pontificate. The ceremony occurs shortly after the conclave. Once the initial whirlwind of his election, the public appearances, the Orbi et Orbi blessing, the settling into new apartments, has subsided enough for a moment of profound gravity. It is arranged by the Cardinal Camerlengo, the Chamberlain who will administer the Vatican during the subsequent Seed Vac. The Camerlengo is the guardian of this transition, and his role in this ritual is essential. The Pope enters the hall alone. Awaiting him are three figures: the Cardinal Camerlengo, the Cardinal Archivist of the Vatican Secret Archive, and the Dean of the College of Cardinals. The atmosphere is one of intense formality and solemnity. No words are exchanged in greeting. Before them, on a simple wooden table, rests a large leather-bound book, the Liber Testamentarum, the Book of Testaments. It contains the recorded oaths of every pope for the last 5 centuries, each written in the hand of the pontiff who swore it. The ritual begins with a prayer led by the Dean of the College of Cardinals, asking for the Holy Spirit to guide the Pope and grant him the wisdom and fidelity to uphold the sacred duties of his office, even in foreseeing its end. Then, the Cardinal Archivist opens the Liber Testamentarum to a new, blank page. He presents the Pope with a pen and a unique iron gall ink, the formula of which is known only to the archivists, ensuring the longevity of the script. The Pope then reads the oath aloud from a card handed to him by the Camerlengo. The text is ancient and unchanging. He swears, by Almighty God and upon the Holy Gospels, that he will never divulge the contents of the Armorium, Arcanorum, or the precise details of the secret rituals to any person not lawfully entitled to know them. He swears to execute these rites with fidelity and discernment throughout his pontificate. Then comes the core of the oath. He swears that, should he sense his death approaching, his final earthly duty will be to secure all knowledge pertaining to these mysteries. This does not mean destruction, but consolidation and protection. He vows to ensure that any personal notes he may have made are burned. He must reaffirm the instructions to the Camerlengo and the archivist regarding the procedures for the next conclave and the transmission of the secret knowledge to his successor. He is, in effect, swearing to orchestrate the graceful and silent transfer of the Church, disposed hidden responsibilities from his hands to those of the next man who will sit on the chair of Peter, whoever that may be. After reciting the oath, the Pope signs the Liber Testamentarum in a firm hand, recording his name and the date of his election. The 3 cardinals then each sign the page as witnesses. The book is closed. The Cardinal Camerlengo then presents the Pope with a small, iron key. This is not a key that opens any physical lock in the Vatican. It is a symbolic key, representing his acceptance of the duty to lock away the secrets of his pontificate at the moment of his death. The Pope accepts it and places it in a small pocket inside his white cassock, where it will remain a constant, tangible reminder of his ultimate responsibility until the day he dies. The oath of the Last Testament is a ritual of profound humility and institutional wisdom. It forces a man who has just attained the highest peak of ecclesiastical power to immediately confront his own mortality and his role as a temporary custodian. It is the ultimate safeguard, ensuring that the secret rituals of the papacy do not die with the Pope, but are faithfully passed on, and that the Church is protected from the potential scandal or doctrinal confusion that could arise if its most arcane and potent spiritual practices were to be scattered or misappropriated. In this silent ceremony, the Pope pledges that his final act of governance will be one of self-effacement, securing the mysteries of his office for the future, so that the bark of Peter may continue its journey steady and sure through the storms of history. The performance of these rituals is not an isolated aspect of the papacy. It is woven into the very fabric of the man who bears the office. To understand the full impact of these secret duties, one must consider their cumulative effect on the psyche, the spirituality, and the daily life of the Supreme Pontiff. The white cassock, a symbol of purity and sacrifice, becomes a garment of immense weight, lined with the invisible threads of solitary responsibility. The knowledge of these rites creates a distinct interior solitude. While the Pope is constantly surrounded by aides, secretaries, guards, cardinals, and pilgrims, he carries within him a core of secrets that cannot be shared. He cannot seek counsel on whether to perform the private exorcism. He cannot ask a theologian to clarify a point in the rubric of the global chalice. He cannot unburden himself to a friend about the emotional toll of the liturgy for the unseen martyr. This knowledge is his alone, a sacred burden that forever separates him from even his closest collaborators. It fosters a profound reliance on prayer, not as a formal duty, but as the only possible conversation about matters that otherwise must remain locked in silence. His relationship with God becomes, out of sheer necessity, his most intimate and real partnership. This solitude is compounded by the constant awareness of his predecessors. When he unlocks the Armoriam Arcanorum, he handles portfolios tied with the seals of popes who faced the Black Death, the Reformation, or World Wars. When he consecrates the global chalice, he uses the same vessel as pontiffs who reigned during the sack of Rome or the fall of empires. He is never truly alone in these acts. He is part of a chain of men who have stood in the same darkness, breathed the same incense-laden air, and whispered the same prayers. This is a source of immense strength, but also of acute pressure. He becomes acutely aware that he is a link in that chain, and that his fidelity, or lack thereof, will affect the pontiffs who come after him. The oath of the Last Testament makes this explicit, binding him to them in a fellowship of silence that transcends time. Furthermore, these rituals shape his perception of global events. While world leaders and news agencies analyze crises through political, economic, and social lenses, the Pope is also viewing them through a unique spiritual prism. An outbreak of war is not just a geopolitical failure. It is a potential trigger for the ritual of the three keys. A profound scandal within the Church is not just a public relations disaster. It is a wound that may require the private exorcism of the Holy See. This dual perspective, the public and the profoundly secret, can create a deep sense of urgency and a different hierarchy of concerns than that of the outside world. It can also lead to decisions in his public ministry that seem inexplicable to outsiders, but are perfectly logical in the context of his private, intercessory duties. The physical and emotional toll should not be underestimated. These are not simple prayers, they are lengthy, intense, and psychologically demanding ceremonies. The fasting before the secret consecration, the prolonged kneeling during the exorcism, the emotional weight of the liturgy for the unseen martyr, all demand a significant expenditure of spiritual and physical energy. For an older man, which most popes are, this can be exhausting. It is a hidden asceticism, a form of penance and discipline unseen by the world, undertaken for the sake of the flock he shepherds. Yet, for all this weight, there is also a profound consolation. In a world that constantly demands his attention and opinion, these rituals are moments of pure, undiluted purpose. There are no cameras, no speeches to write, no audiences to manage. There is only the duty and the divine. In the silence of the Cappella del Coro, or the solitude of his study, the Pope can simply be what he is at his core, a priest. This return to the essential, to the primal act of intercession, can be a source of renewal and strength, reminding him why he accepted the office in the first place amidst the overwhelming complexities of leading a global faith. The white cassock, therefore, is not just white, it is layered with the crimson of martyrdom remembered, the purple of penance undertaken, the black of mortality accepted, and the gold of eternal hope. The secret rituals are the threads that weave these colors into the fabric of the papacy itself. They are the hidden engine of the office, the constant, rhythmic pulse of prayer and power that beats beneath the public spectacle, sustaining it, informing it, and reminding the man who wears it that his ultimate accountability is not to a board of advisors, or to the court of public opinion, but to the divine authority that called him to become the successor of Peter. The most critical moment for any secret tradition is its point of transfer. For the private rituals of the papacy, this occurs during the precarious and emotionally charged period of the seed vacantatha, vacant see, between the death of one pope and the election of his successor. The smooth and silent handover of this sacred knowledge is itself governed by an unwritten protocol, a final, hidden ritual performed not by the pope, but by the few cardinals entrusted with the Church's continuity. The process begins not with the pope's last breath, but in the final days of his life. If he is granted the clarity to foresee his end, he is bound by the oath of the Last Testament to begin his final preparations. He will spend his last energies not on public statements, but on private duty. He must ensure that any personal journals or notes pertaining to the rituals are consigned to fire. He will have a final, private meeting with the Cardinal Camerlengo and the Cardinal Archivist. This meeting is not recorded. No minutes are taken. In hushed tones, weakened by illness, the dying Pope confirms that his instructions are understood. He may share a final piece of counsel, a nuance of discernment he learned through experience, perhaps a sign that indicated to him the need for the exorcism, or a particular difficulty in performing the consecration. This is the living tradition being passed on, the tacit knowledge that cannot be written down. Upon the Pope's death, the Camerlengo's most sensitive duty even, before formally verifying the death and overseeing the breaking of the fisherman's ring, is to secure the papal apartments. This is done with a discretion that avoids causing alarm. His first destination is not the Pope's bedroom, but his private study and chapel. Using his own key and the key retrieved from the deceased Pope's effects, he secures the area. He personally checks the hidden niche containing the chalice of the world and the pattern of the nations, ensuring the vessels are present and undisturbed. He confirms the portfolio from the Armoria Marcanorum, if one was on loan to the study, is present and accounted for. Only once this spiritual seal is placed upon the Pope's private world does the Camerlengo turn to the public duties of managing the physical death. The conclave proceeds as the world sees it. The cardinals are sequestered, the ballots are burned, and the smoke signals a decision. But for the Camerlengo and the archivist, there is an added layer of intense anticipation. They alone know the weight of the knowledge that must be transmitted. They pray that the new Pope will be a man of profound spiritual depth, discretion, and strength, for he will need to bear this unique burden. The transmission occurs within hours of the election, in the moments of chaotic joy and shock, as the new Pope is whisked away to the Sala del Pianto, the room of tears, to don his white cassock for the first time. The atmosphere in that small, stark room is overwhelming for the new pontiff. He is surrounded by a flurry of activity tailors, masters of ceremonies, stunned aides. It is in this maelstrom that the Camerlengo and the archivist seek a moment of his time. They approach him together. The noise of the room seems to fade around their hushed circle. The Camerlengo will traditionally be the one to speak first. His words are simple, pre-rehearsed and grave. He says something to the effect of, "Your Holiness, in addition to the visible keys of this office, there are others, invisible to the world, which you must now receive. We are here to assist you in this." This is the moment of awakening for the new Pope. However much he might have suspected or heard rumors, the confirmation is now given. The weight begins to descend. The formal briefing is scheduled for later that night, or the following morning, in the new Pope's temporary quarters, before he takes possession of the papal apartment. The Camerlengo and the archivist attend. They bring with them the Liber Testamentorum, open to the page where the new Pope's predecessor signed his oath. They guide him through the locations of the hidden items, the key to the armorium, the niche of the chalice, the panel in the Sacristia dei Papi. They show him the ancient missal for the liturgy of the unseen martyr and the text for the exorcism of the Holy See. They answer his questions, but much is left for him to discover on his own through prayer and the reading of the sealed portfolios. The final act of the transmission is the new Pope's first solitary act as Supreme Pontiff. Once the cardinals have left him, he will inevitably be drawn to the items he has been shown. He may unlock the cabinet and simply rest his hand on the portfolios, feeling the presence of his predecessors. He may hold the simple silver chalice of the world, feeling its surprising weight, both physical and spiritual. He is alone, yet he is now part of a communion that spans centuries. The chain has been repaired. The silence has been preserved. The transmission is successful only if the outside world notices nothing. No announcement is made. No document is signed. The seamless continuity of the Church's public face is a testament to the flawless execution of this private, sacred handover. The new Pope, now bearing the full weight of his office, both public and private, turns his face toward the light of his first day, carrying within him the secrets of the night. While the secret rituals are performed in absolute privacy, their influence subtly permeates the public actions and demeanor of the Pope. They are not disconnected from his daily ministry, but are its hidden foundation, its deep root system. A careful observer, armed with the knowledge of these rites, might detect faint echoes of them in the public square. Glimpses of the private man behind the public figure, grappling with his immense, dual responsibility. One of the most discernible echoes is in the thematic choices for his general audiences, homilies, and in a pope who has recently performed the liturgy of the unseen martyr might deliver a powerful series of talks on the theology of martyrdom, speaking with a peculiar intensity about the hidden saints who sanctify the world through their anonymous witness. He might emphasize the value of humility and obscurity in a world obsessed with fame and recognition, his words carrying the weight of someone who has just celebrated a Mass for a soul known only to God. Similarly, A period following the private exorcism of the Holy See might be marked by a surprising and robust series of actions aimed at internal reform and purification within the Curia. There might be a new hardness in his tone when addressing clericalism, financial misconduct, or the abuse of power. While these would be justified by the obvious needs of the Church, the urgency and spiritual depth behind them could stem from the profound act of spiritual cleansing he has undertaken privately. It would be the public fruition of a private battle. The performance of the secret consecration of the global chalice could manifest in a heightened focus on global solidarity. The Pope's prayers during the Angelus or Orbi et Orbi blessings might take on a more cosmic dimension, explicitly offering up the joys and sorrows of all humanity, echoing the language of the secret rite. His diplomatic efforts and calls for peace might be infused with a unique, almost mystical certainty about the spiritual unity of the human family, a certainty forged in the solitary act of consecrating the world at the solstice. Even the ritual of the three keys leaves its trace. A pope who has recently unlocked the Armorium Arcanorum to confront a specific global crisis might seem preternaturally focused on that issue. His speeches, his diplomacy, and his prayers would circle around it with a singular intensity that might puzzle political analysts who see only the geopolitical dimensions. They would be witnessing the public arm of a strategy whose core is a deeply private act of intercession. The toll of these rituals can also be glimpsed at times. Following the demanding spiritual and physical exertion of a rite like the exorcism, the Pope might appear unusually weary at a public audience, his face lined with a fatigue that seems more than physical. It is the exhaustion of a man who has waged a war in the spirit realm. Conversely, after the consoling beauty of the liturgy for the unseen martyr, he might exhibit a profound, quiet joy, a deep-seated peace that radiates from him, reassuring the faithful in a way they feel but cannot explain. These are not calculated performances. They are organic bleat. The man who stands on the loggia of St. Peter's is the same man who hours or days before might have been kneeling in the dark of the Cappello del Coro. The gravity and consolation of those private moments become part of him, shaping his priorities, hardening his resolve against evil, softening his heart toward the suffering, and informing his prophetic voice. The secret rituals ensure that his public ministry is not merely administrative or diplomatic, but is continually rooted in and refreshed by the deepest wells of prayer and sacrifice. The faithful who gather in St. Peter's Square, watching the small white figure in the distance, are unaware of the hidden burdens he carries. They see the Father of the universal Church. They do not see the solitary priest who has offered that universality up to God in a secret chalice. But they benefit from both. The public strength of the papacy is underwritten by its private prayer. The visible ministry is sustained by the invisible sacrifice. The light they see shining from the apostolic palace is fed by the secret, sacred fire burning in its most private chapels. Our journey behind the veil of papal secrecy concludes not with a grand ceremony or a dramatic revelation, but in the quiet of the Pope's private study, in the deep hours of the night. The narrative of these rituals ultimately leads us to a single man, sitting in prayerful silence before a crucifix, the weight of his office resting upon his shoulders like a mantle woven from both light and shadow. The white cassock hangs nearby, a stark symbol in the dim light, representing a purity that must be constantly fought for and defended in the hidden recesses of the spirit. The secret rituals performed only by the Pope are not a separate, parallel papacy. They are its beating heart. They are the means by which the Supreme Pontiff, the Vicar of Christ, fulfills the most ancient and essential duties of his office: to intercede, to sanctify, to protect, and to offer sacrifice. While the world sees the global traveler, the skilled diplomat, and the teacher of doctrine, these private rites reveal the Pope in his primary identity as the Church's highest priest. They are the ultimate expression of his role as Pontifex Maximus, the supreme bridge builder, between nations, but between heaven and earth, between the visible and the invisible realms. These traditions defy simple categorization. They are not superstition, for they are grounded in a sophisticated theology of intercession and sacramentality. They are not magic, for their efficacy is believed to reside not in the ritual itself, but in the grace of God, invoked through the authority of the Petrine office. They are, instead, the highest form of spiritual operation, the application of the Church, as most potent spiritual instruments by the one man entrusted with their use for the good of all. The existence of such rituals speaks to a profound understanding of spiritual reality within the Catholic tradition. It is an understanding that acknowledges the existence of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, a struggle in which the Church is not a passive observer, but an active participant. The Pope in this context is the commander on the spiritual battlefield, and these rituals are his strategic operations launched from the quiet of the command center, unseen by the troops in the field, but essential for their ultimate victory. Furthermore, they are a powerful testament to the individual humanity of each Pope. These are not automated functions of an office. They require faith, discernment, courage, and profound personal holiness. Each man brings his own strengths, weaknesses, and spiritual character to their performance. One Pope might approach the exorcism of the Holy See with the fiery zeal of a warrior saint, while another might perform it with the sorrowful heart of a physician diagnosing a deep sickness. The ritual of the three keys might fill one with intellectual awe at the history he is unlocking, and another with a trembling sense of his own unworthiness. The rite remains the same, but the man within the rite is uniquely, humanly himself. In an age of relentless transparency and oversharing, the persistence of such secrecy is a radical counter-testimony. It declares that not everything of value can be, or should be, streamed, tweeted, or analyzed. It asserts the existence of a sacred space that must be protected from the profane, not out of arrogance, but out of reverence for its holiness. The silence surrounding these rituals is itself a form of prayer, respectful silence before mystery. Finally, these rituals are an enduring sign of hope. The fact that each Pope, upon his election, accepts this hidden burden along with the glorious crown, is a testament to the resilience of the Church and the grace that sustains it. It is a promise that no matter how turbulent the times, no matter how deep the scandals, no matter how great the external threats or internal decays, there is always one man on earth who is kneeling in the dark, fighting for the light. He is offering the world in a chalice, cleansing the stones of his own house, honoring the forgotten witness, and preparing to pass on the keys of his authority to his successor. The story of the secret rituals of the papacy is, therefore, not a sensational expose but a quiet hymn to faith, duty, and sacrifice. It is a reminder that the most powerful forces in the world are often the most silent, and that the true history of the Church is written, not only in its public councils and decrees, but in the whispered prayers and solitary tears of the men who have dared to sit upon the chair of Peter, bearing the weight of the world in their hearts and the secrets of heaven in their hands. And so, the narrative ends where it began, in silence, in prayer, and in the unwavering belief that from the depths of that secrecy flows a grace that sustains us all. Beyond the specific, documented rituals lies an even more elusive aspect of the Pope's secret duties, the guardianship of the lex nan, scripto, the unwritten law. This is not a codex or a set of decrees, but a body of oral tradition, intuitive discernment, and prudential judgments passed from Pope to Pope. It encompasses the how and when, rather than the what. It is the accumulated wisdom on navigating the spiritual perils that have no prescribed rite, the crises for which the Armarium Arcanorum holds no prepared portfolio. The transmission of the unwritten law occurs, not in a formal briefing, but in the rare, unguarded moments between a pope and his closest aides, or is inferred from the actions of predecessors studied in secret. It might involve the discernment of a spirit of the age that poses a unique threat to the faith, not a heresy to be condemned, but a subtle, pervasive atmosphere of error to be countered through specific pastoral emphasis. It could be the knowledge of how to pray for a particular nation whose government is actively persecuting the Church without exposing the underground faithful. It is the understanding of how to recognize when a theological dispute is a healthy debate and when it is the opening salvo of a schism, requiring private intervention before public condemnation becomes necessary. This guardianship often manifests in decisions that seem idiosyncratic or inexplicable to outsiders. A pope might suddenly elevate the feast day of a particular obscure saint to the universal calendar. To the world, it seems an arcane liturgical detail, but within the context of the unwritten law, it might be a response to a perceived need for that saint's particular charism, be it humility, doctrinal courage, or missionary zeal, to be invoked by the whole Church against a prevailing spiritual danger. He might insist on a specific phrasing in an encyclical, a nuance that seems minor to theologians but which he knows, from the wisdom of his predecessors, acts as a bulwark against a future misinterpretation. The unwritten law also governs the Pope's relationship with the other rituals. It is this law that guides his discernment on whether the conditions have been met to perform the private exorcism. It is this intuitive wisdom that tells him which portfolio to select. From the armorium during the ritual of the three keys, there is no checklist. There is only the sensus populist, sense of the papacy, a faculty honed by prayer, study, and the heavy weight of responsibility. He must feel the need for the ritual in his spirit, a disquiet that cannot be quelled by public prayer alone, a certainty that a specific, hidden action is required. This aspect of the papal ministry is the most solitary of all. For the written rituals, he has texts to follow. For the unwritten law, he has only his own conscience, his communion with the past popes, and his dialogue with God. It is here that he is most truly the shepherd, smelling of the sheep, but also standing watch against the wolves. He alone may sense gathering at the edges of the fold. The guardian of the unwritten law must be a mystic and a realist, a visionary and a pragmatist, holding the tension between the eternal truths of the faith and the shifting, shadowy challenges of the present age. The final question that arises from the contemplation of these secret rituals is the simplest and the most profound. What is their ultimate effect? In the silent performance of these rites, does anything actually happen? From the perspective of faith, the answer is not found in measurable, worldly outcomes, but in the unseen order of grace. Theologically, the efficacy of these rituals is rooted in the Catholic understanding of the communion of saints and the Pope's unique role as the head of the Church on earth. His prayers, particularly those offered in persona Christi and in persona ecclesiae, in the person of the Church, are believed to have a power that transcends individual petition. They draw upon the infinite merits of Christ's sacrifice and channel them for the specific intention of the prayer. Therefore, the secret consecration of the global chalice is not a mere symbol. It is a genuine, potent outpouring of grace upon the world, a spiritual strengthening that fortifies humanity against despair and evil, often in ways that are imperceptible to the naked eye, but real in the spiritual realm. The private exorcism of the Holy See does not result in a public announcement that the Vatican is now clean. Its effect is believed to be a renewed clarity, a resilience against temptation for those who work within the Curia, a weakening of the powers and principalities that seek to distort the Church's mission. It creates spiritual space for reform and renewal to take root. The liturgy of the unseen martyr has a twofold effect. For the Church, it gathers the fruit of that martyr's sacrifice and makes it available to all the faithful, adding their courage to the Church's spiritual treasury. For the martyr themselves, the Church teaches that the Mass is the highest possible prayer, capable of aiding a soul in its final journey into the full presence of God. The Pope, in offering this Mass, is acting as a faithful father, ensuring that his most hidden child receives the fullest honors. The ritual of the three keys and the oath of the Last Testament have the tangible effect of ensuring continuity. They are the mechanisms of institutional memory and spiritual stability, protecting the Church from the amnesia and vulnerability that could come with each transition of power. Yet beyond any specific outcome, the greatest effect of these rituals may be on the Pope himself. To regularly perform these acts of ultimate intercession is to be constantly refined and humbled. The rituals are a forge in which his own soul is tempered. They prevent him from reducing his office to a mere administration or a global celebrityhood. They force him to confront the core of his faith, again and again, in the starkest terms. They are a perpetual reminder that his power is not his own, but is loaned to him for the service of others. In the end, the echo of these rituals is heard in eternity. They are the Church's secret heartbeat, a rhythm of prayer and sacrifice that has continued for 2 millennia. They are a testament to the belief that the visible world is interpenetrated by the invisible, and that the most important battles are not fought on television screens, but on the knees of a solitary man in a silent chapel, holding the entire world seen and unseen in his aching, prayerful heart. The rituals are his offering, and their echo is the quiet, enduring sound of grace falling upon a waiting world. The existence of these rituals inevitably invites a historical question. How have such profound secrets remained concealed across centuries of upheaval, schism, and scrutiny? The answer lies not in a perfect, impenetrable vault, but in a complex interplay of discipline, misdirection, and the sheer, daunting scale of the Vatican's own history. The Church is an institution that thinks in centuries. Its mechanisms for preserving continuity are unparalleled. The secret rituals are protected by a culture of silence that is deeply ingrained in the Vatican's ethos, a discipline far stronger than any mere non-disclosure agreement. For the handful of cardinals and officials who glimpse the edges of these mysteries, discretion is a sacred vow, a part of their service to the office of Peter. To break this trust is understood as a grave spiritual and institutional sin, a betrayal that would unravel the very fabric of their identity. This culture ensures that whispers rarely, if ever, become public declarations. Furthermore, the rituals are shielded by their own arcane nature. The vastness of the Vatican archives, with its miles of shelving holding millions of documents, is the perfect hiding place. A single portfolio of vellum amidst this ocean of paper is effectively invisible. Even if a researcher were to somehow stumble upon it, the archaic language, the coded script, and the lack of context would likely render it incomprehensible, dismissed as perhaps an obscure liturgical draft or a personal devotional text of a long-dead pope. The truth is hidden in plain sight, protected by its own impenetrability. History itself has acted as a filter. Periods of immense turmoil, the sack of Rome in 1527, the Napoleonic invasion of the Papal States, the political upheavals of the 19th century forced the Church to become adept at securing its treasures. While gold and artwork were often the target of looters, the true secrets, the written rituals, were prioritized for evacuation to secure locations, their value understood only by a select few. This practice of emergency protocol, refined over generations, has ensured the survival of these texts through every crisis. There is also the deliberate strategy of misdirection. The Church has never denied the existence of secrets. In fact, it openly speaks of mysteries. This allows the public imagination to project its own fantasies onto the Vatican tales of hidden papal armies, vaults containing proof of extraterrestrial life, or the lost treasure of the Templars. These sensational myths act as a noise machine, drowning out the quieter, more profound reality of the secret rituals. The world is so busy looking for fantastical secrets that it misses the real ones, which are spiritual, not material, in nature. Perhaps the most effective safeguard, however, is the personal character of the men who become pope. The conclave, for all its political dimensions, has an uncanny ability to select men who understand the gravity of this sacred trust. The office, as they say, makes the man. The weight of the white cassock instills a profound sense of duty that overwhelms any personal desire for self-aggrandizement or revelation. Each pope understands that he is a temporary keeper of a flame that must be passed on, untarnished and undimmed, to his successor. Thus, the rituals have endured. They have survived the Renaissance papacies known for their nepotism and excess, the reforming popes of the Counter-Reformation, the prisoner popes of the Vatican, and the modern media-savvy pontiffs. They form a golden thread of continuity, running through the entire tapestry of church history, untouched by the flaws of the individual men, who, despite their humanity, have each in their turn faithfully performed the duties entrusted to them alone. The scrutiny of the ages has not broken the chain. It has only proven its strength.